Everybody, it's Claire here from Sewing by Claire and welcome back to part 2 of the sew along for the Lily Rose Dolls design from the Apple Blossom Woodland collection called Clara the Cat. And here's Clara from my kit that we're working on, and she's very pretty there. And today we're going to be looking at cutting out the pattern pieces, and then we'll in later parts moved on to sewing up the head and the body before we then move on to the clothes. I'm doing this in smaller bite-sized chunks, so it's going to seem like there's quite a lot of parts to it, but hopefully then you'll be able to just jump in at the bits that you want to do and to refresh yourself on. So in the first part that we've just done, we were talking about the templates and doing our patterns and how we can use the master pattern and keep a copy of that intact, and then we'll then cut ours out, and I've cut these out onto cards so that they're nice and durable. So the next thing then that I want you to do is to have a look in your kit and to find your felt, because the first thing we're going to do is just give this a quick press and a steam just to make sure that that's all nice and flat for us, because it's much easier to get these packing lines out whilst the felt is flat like this rather than before we start joining with smaller pieces. And I don't want to be ironing this after we've traced on the pattern pieces, because we're going to be using a heat erasable pen in order to do that and to give us our sewing line that we're going to follow. So if we iron it after we've traced it, we're going to lose all of our marks, so we don't want to do that. So let me just turn the camera around. I'll get my little iron out and ironing mat, and then we'll get started. And I just want to say a huge thank you to Claire and Richard from Lily Rose Dolls for their kindness in sponsoring this video for me. They have provided the kit to me so that I could bring this video to you, and I'm so excited. So I just really want to say a really big thank you. And if you wanted to get a kit for yourself, if you're jumping straight into this video, and you miss where you can get yours from, then I'll pop the address up here. Because it's Lily has got actually got 3 L's in it. It's Lilly Rose Dolls, and it's .uk, not .co.uk, just .uk. So that's just something a little bit different, but I'll pop it up here for you so that you've got that if you want to order a kit for yourself. Okay, so I've just got my wool pressing mat out, and I've also got my felt, and I've also got my mini iron. This is a mini iron from Prim, which works really well for these smaller characters. And I'm just waiting for my iron to warm up, and I've just put a little bit of water in so we've got some steam. And then while this is warming up, we can just start to use the iron just to iron out these creases, and this is going to iron up beautifully, I think. You can use a press cloth if you want to, but I've never had a problem so far with singeing my felt. I do keep the iron on the move just to make sure that that's not going to put too much heat in any one place. And here we go. Doesn't take long, but it just makes a much flatter and less creased area for you to be working with when you're putting your characters on. Just make sure that you try and get the steam and the heat equal all the way through that piece of felt. And also I use this just for having a quick eye on the felt as well, just to see if I prefer one side to another, or if there's any large areas. This is quite a lovely and beautifully mottled, I think it's actually a wool viscose felt, and I think that this is a really nice gentle mottling on it, but sometimes you can get some splodges of mottling in the, it's a natural fibre, isn't it? So you're going to get that in those areas. So I would just keep my eye out for any parts that I might want to use or avoid, just whilst I'm doing this process as well. But yeah, no, it all looks good. I do like this side though, I think, better than that side. Yeah, I'm going to use this side as my top side. Okay, let me just put the iron away. If you want to iron your fabric as well, and then we'll come back and talk about laying out the pattern. Okay, so I actually like this side as being my top side. There's not much difference between the two, and with felt quite often you don't necessarily have a right side or a wrong side, but you may have a side that you prefer. So just choose whichever one you want. Once you've chosen which side you want to be your best side, I'm going to suggest that you turn your felt over so you've got your wrong side up. And that's because we're going to trace around our pattern pieces with a heat erasable pen to give us a stitching line, and for the character we're going to actually be stitching from the inside and then turning it through. So that's why we want to be working on the other side. Also, when you're placing your pattern pieces, these cardboard templates onto your fabric, you want to remember that you need to leave your seam allowance, because when we trace around these pattern pieces now, we're actually tracing on the sewing line. And so this is the way that they do pattern making when they're working with couture fabrics, and also in the professional world. Seam allowance already added is something that was done for the domestic market more. And it has been widely accepted now, but this is the correct traditional way of doing it. So we're going to work this way. So there you can see I've got about 1/4 of an inch at the top there and 1/4 of an inch here. And then all I want to do then is just mark in my lines here. If I put my pen on and just come out, then I've got a couple of lines there. So that's one. So now I'm going to turn this over so we can work with the reverse. And I need to remember that not only do I need 1/4 of an inch here, down at the bottom of this one, but I also need another 1/4 of an inch just here. We might not need the extra 1/4 of an inch on the seam allowance at the bottom of the neck, but I think I'll probably add that anyway, because we can always take it off, whereas we can't add it on again if we've already cut it off. But we then need to remember that we need 1/2 an inch between these two pattern pieces here. Let me just get my seam gauge, because it's always handy to have a seam gauge near you, and this has just got a slider on it that just tells you where you are with the. So if we make sure we've got 1/2 an inch from the one point to the other, we know we're going to have at least 1/4 of an inch then between those two. So let me just put these on as well. So that's the head going on and going round. And Claire's very good with her patterns, Claire and Richard. They're very good at letting you know whether or not you need to be adding seam allowance on or not. So because it's not said to leave any off, I'm going to add it on, and I've just transferred those markings across. So we've got one on the tip of the nose, and then we've got one just there. Okay, so that's that. So that's the head done now. So I've got a little plastic bag here. I'm just going to pop that inside because I've finished with that piece now. So now let's have a look at our next piece, which is the body, and see where we can fit that in. Should we fit that in, or should we fit the leg in? No, we're going to need to just take our time and just do these gradually. So I'm going to put this on the slant so that we can use the best amount of the fur, the felt that we've got. And I want 1/4 of an inch from the edge here and 1/4 of an inch there. So let's go around here, just make sure we're about right. And I'm going to do, and this is a non-symmetrical piece, so again this is going to have one done this way and one done with the blue side of my card up so that it's in reverse. Okay, make sure your lines are there and complete so you can see them. So whilst we've done that one, let's now turn that over, and now we'll come here and we'll put another one in just here. So again, let's just make sure that we've got that 1/2 an inch at least between our pattern pieces to make sure that we've got enough for our seam allowance, and then I'm going to draw around it. There would be an argument for adding your seam allowance on and then using 1/4 of an inch all the way through. And I know that if you're familiar with using the lunar lapping characters, and if you're coming new to my channel, you'll know that I've got quite a few videos on doing that. Then you will know that on those I have added 1/4 of an inch seam allowance onto the templates, and I cut out my fabric with that. But I'm doing it the way that the designer said for this one. Let's just put a little mark there, a little mark there. That's the opening to keep the back open. So I've got those two now, so let's pop that one away as well. We've got a head gusset here, which will probably fit nicely in just here. So let's pop that in just there. Again, making sure you've got your 1/4 of an inch between your other pattern pieces. And felt doesn't have a grain, so although we've got a grain line on the actual pattern piece, that's more for if you were making this character out of a fabric other than felt. So let's put our little notches in here. We've got A and 2 B's there, but that's fine, that's all we've got. So that's all fine. So now we only need to cut one of that, so I've popped that into there. We've got an ear to cut out. Not quite got enough room there, we'll do that in a second. Let's do our legs next. And I'm going to cut 2 this way up and 2 the other side up so that we've got 2 matching pairs of these as well. And I bet these will lie nicely. So again, let me just check, we've got 1/2 an inch between, we have. 1/4 inch down from the top. Doesn't take long. And if you do go wrong with these pens, you can just, this is a Uniball erasable ink, and it just irons out with heat, so you can just use your iron to get that round. So that's that orientation. So let's do another orientation down here, and we need 1/2 inch between these two at least, and 1/4 inch off the bottom. That's getting quite tight there, but I think we should be fine there. Okay, so that's going to be this one here. And if you wanted to, you could cut out all of your pattern pieces at once, in order that you can make sure then that you've got enough for each of yours to fit on. So here we go, another one as well. Let's just do 1/4 inch off the bottom there. So so I've done one that way and one that way. Now I need to turn it over so that we can do the corresponding second part of these legs. We do it that way. I think that'll be best use of the felt then. So 1/4 inch from the sides, 1/2 inch from the others, and then we can draw around it. Okay, so that's that one that way, and then let's do another one this way up here. We've got those fitted in then. Feels like it's a generous piece of felt as well, so we've got enough room to be playing around with these without worrying too much, which is great. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 legs. So let's pop that away there into our bag, and then we're going to go onto our arm, and we're going to do exactly the same. We're going to do 2 this way and 2 that way, and then we're going to use our ear as well, and we'll do 2. We'll cut out 4. 2 of these need to be in the contrast, so if you go into your kit and find your pink piece of felt, then you'll also need to do your ears, and you'll need to leave that seam allowance around your ears again, the way that we have done before. So let's just go around this. So there's one. Let's use the other corner. That's nice and easy, isn't it then? 1/4 inch around those, so you've got enough to be able to manipulate it round on your sewing machine. There we go, so that's those 2 pieces. Okay, so that's what I'm going to carry on and do now. Finish off the arms, and I'll do my ears onto this brown fabric, the taupe fabric as well, and then I'll come back to you when we go on to the next stage. Okay, so we've got all of our pieces now just cut out onto here. There is an argument to say that you could just go straight in now and leave in yourself your seam allowance, the difference between the two. You could rough cut these out now, because we're going to be actually joining on the drawn line. However, I know me, and I know that I will go onto automatic pilot and I'll start cutting onto the line, which I know is not the correct thing to do. So I am just going to take a moment to just mark a few lines around the outside of these pieces, so that I know that I've got my seam allowance sufficiently, just as a guide. And I'm not drawing it all the way round, I'm just putting myself some reference little marks using the 1/4 inch on my little ruler here. And that will just make sure then that I remember where I need to be cutting out, because when you've only got a certain amount of felt in a kit, we've not got endless supplies, have we? So we need to make sure that we've got enough. And it'll just remind me that I need to just cut that out with that extra. And so again, we can just, so I'm just going to go around now and just mark on some seam allowance on all of my pieces, just to give me that reminder that I don't need to go too gung-ho at it and start snipping on top of the lines, because I just know I will do. So you don't need to watch me do that. I just wanted to show you how I was going to do that, just to make sure that I don't then make a mistake, because I want this to be perfect for everybody and for me too. And so I'm just going to go around all of my characters, and you can see I've just put a little dotted line just around, and that will actually be my cutting line that I'll remember. So I'm going to do that with all of my pieces, and then I'm going to cut them all out, and then I'll come back to you. The one thing I want to say before I actually disappear off is the reason why I copy, even though we're only working on the head at this moment, the reason why I copy all of my pieces out at first is I want to make sure that before I start cutting out one thing, everything's going to fit onto here. So we have to make sure we've got 2 heads and a head insert. We need to make sure we've got 2 bodies. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 legs, 1, 2, 3, 4 arms and 2 ears, and then we know we're good to go. And we've got a nice piece of felt here, just nice and spare, which is what I like to see. So let me get on with doing that next stage, and then I'll come back to you and we'll talk about where we're going to go from there. Okay, so I've just finished cutting everything out, and you can see that we've got my roughly cut outside edge, and then we've got my actual stitching line there shown. So we'll just run through all the pieces. So I've got my 4 arms, and the other thing that I've done on my arms is I've just put a little dash at the top so that I'll know which is the top of my arms when I'm sewing them together, because they're quite similar top and bottom, but there is a little bit of a difference. So that would be something I just suggest you do, just do that. And then when we are actually sewing these together, we'll put a pin on one side so that we can remember which is the top and which isn't, so that we know where we are with those. So I've got 2 left and 2 right arms, so you can see those. This is the mirroring in person, because now when we put these on top of each other and we match up our sewing lines, we're going to have 2 that fit perfectly. Can you see a left and a right? And that's what you need to do with those mirroring pieces, which is why I talk about it so much. We've then got 2 left and 2 right of the legs, so we've got 2 pairs. We've got a left and a right of our body, a left and a right of our head, a head gusset, and then I've got 2 grey ears, or 2 grey fawny ears, and 2 pink ears as well. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for now. That's cutting out the fabric for the body, for the head and the limbs, body, head, limbs, yeah, that's it, in order to do that, and just talking about that seam allowance, because the next stage then is we're going to move on to cutting to sewing up the head. But I just thought if I can do it in bite-sized chunks, it'll hopefully be easier for you, and then say you can dip in and out as you want to. So we'll leave it there for now. If you're enjoying this series and you want to sew along with me, then please do click the subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. It's lovely to know that you're here and working along with me, and just drop me a message. I always reply as well. And then we will then get on with starting on the construction, so that's the exciting bit. Okay, take care everybody, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.